3 compost piles. Same bin size, same starting weight, same 6 weeks of time. One of them finished dark, crumbly, and smelled like a forest floor. One of them finished slimy and smelled bad enough that I nearly threw the whole batch out. And one of them barely broke down at all. 6 weeks later, I could still recognize individual leaves in it. Same effort, same time, wildly different results. The difference wasn't luck, it was a ratio. And today, I'm showing you exactly what that ratio is and why it matters more than almost anything else in composting. By the end of the last video, I had a working, repeatable way to bring dead soil back to life in about 30 days using nothing but compost, worm castings, mulch, and consistent water. But I glossed over something in that video that I want to correct here because it matters a lot more than I let on at the time. I said compost like it's one single thing. It isn't. The compost I used in that experiment was already finished, already balanced, already doing its job well. What I didn't test was whether the recipe behind that compost, what actually went into the pile in the first place, was the reason it worked as fast as it did. So this time, I built 3 separate compost piles from scratch, using the same total amount of material in each, and changed only one thing between them: the ratio of what gardeners generally call browns and greens. Browns are carbon-rich material, dried leaves, cardboard, straw. Greens are nitrogen-rich material, fresh grass clippings, kitchen scraps, coffee grounds. Every composting guide mentions this ratio in passing. Almost none of them show you what actually happens when you get it wrong. Pile 1 was heavy on browns, roughly 10 parts carbon material to 1 part nitrogen material. Pile 2 was heavy on greens, closer to a 5-to-1 ratio tilted the other direction, with far more kitchen scraps and grass clippings than dried leaves. Pile 3 sat in the middle, close to the 25 or 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio that most composting references point to as the target, though I built it using kitchen scraps and yard waste rather than measuring it in a lab. Same bin size for all 3, same starting weight roughly, same location, same sun exposure, same 6 weeks.
Chapter 1. Why this ratio exists at all. Before showing you what happened in the bins, I want to explain why this ratio matters in the first place, because it's the part most composting advice skips straight past on the way to telling you what to do. The microorganisms that break down organic material need both carbon and nitrogen to function, for the same basic reason any living thing needs both energy and building blocks. Carbon is mostly used as a fuel for the microbes to actually do the work of decomposition. Nitrogen is used to build proteins and reproduce, which is how a small starting population of bacteria and fungi turns into a large enough population to break down an entire pile of material in a reasonable amount of time. Too much carbon and not enough nitrogen, and you get the opposite problem: a population that could theoretically explode in size, except there isn't enough carbon to fuel that growth. So the excess nitrogen breaks down through a different pathway entirely, releasing ammonia gas in the process. That's not a minor side effect. It's the entire mechanism behind why ratio matters, boiled down to something you can actually picture. Carbon feeds the fire. Nitrogen builds the workforce, and if either one badly outweighs the other, the whole system either stalls out or turns rotten instead of breaking down cleanly. It's worth saying plainly that this isn't some obscure detail only chemists care about. It's the single most common reason a first-time composter gives up on the whole process. They throw in kitchen scraps for a few weeks, nothing seems to be happening, or worse, it starts smelling bad, and they conclude composting just doesn't work for them, or that it's more complicated than it's worth. In almost every case I've seen, including my own first attempt years ago, the actual problem was this exact ratio, sitting unaddressed the entire time.
Chapter 2. Building and watching the 3 piles. I built all 3 piles on the same afternoon, layering material loosely rather than packing it down, since compressed material blocks the airflow this whole process depends on. Each pile got roughly the same amount of water at the start, enough to feel like a wrung-out sponge, and I checked moisture weekly after that, adding water only when a squeezed handful stopped holding together at all. I also took a temperature reading at the center of each pile once a week using a simple compost thermometer, because temperature is one of the most honest indicators available of how much biological activity is actually happening inside a pile you can't see into. Pile 3, the balanced one, heated up fastest and hardest, climbing to a genuinely hot 140 degrees Fahrenheit by day 4. That heat isn't just a byproduct, it's a direct sign of an enormous, actively working microbial population. And it's also high enough to kill off most weed seeds and pathogens that might have hitched a ride in with the raw material. By week 2, that heat had already started dropping back down, which is exactly what you want to see. It means the easiest material had been consumed, and the population was settling into a slower, steadier phase of breaking down what was left. Pile 1, heavy on browns, barely warmed at all, hovering only a few degrees above the surrounding air temperature for the entire 6 weeks. That flat temperature line told the story before I ever opened a bin to look. There simply wasn't enough nitrogen fueling a large enough population to generate real heat. The material wasn't rotting or going wrong, it was just moving at a fraction of the pace it should have. Pile 2, heavy on greens, spiked even faster than Pile 3 initially, hitting close to 160 degrees by day 3, almost too hot, which is its own warning sign, since extreme heat can actually start killing off the very organisms doing the work. And by week 2, instead of gradually cooling the way Pile 3 had, it turned wet, dense, and started producing a smell strong enough to notice from several feet away. That smell was the ammonia I mentioned earlier, direct physical evidence of nitrogen breaking down faster than the available carbon could put it to use. I turned all 3 piles on the same schedule, once a week, using a garden fork to fully flip the material rather than just poking at the surface, because oxygen matters here almost as much as the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio does. Without regular turning, even a well-balanced pile can slide into the same wet, airless, ammonia-producing state that Pile 2 ended up in on its own. Turning Pile 2 didn't fix its underlying ratio problem, but it visibly slowed how bad the smell got compared to what I'd expect if I'd left it completely undisturbed for 6 weeks.
Chapter 3. 6 weeks later, opening the bins. By week 6, the differences between these 3 piles weren't subtle. You didn't need a jar test or a thermometer to tell them apart. You could see it from a few feet away. Pile 3, the balanced pile, had finished into something close to what most gardeners picture when they hear the word compost. Dark, almost black, uniformly crumbly, with an earthy smell nearly identical to the compost-fed soil from Video 1. Individual pieces of the original material, leaves, scraps, cardboard, were no longer visible or identifiable at all. It had become something new. Pile 1, heavy on browns, told a very different story. 6 weeks in, I could still clearly identify whole dried leaves and recognizable fragments of cardboard throughout the pile. It had broken down some, and it didn't smell bad. If anything, it barely smelled like anything at all. But it was nowhere near finished. Left alone, this material would likely take several more months to fully break down, simply because the microbial workforce never had enough nitrogen to reach the scale needed to process it any faster. Pile 2, heavy on greens, had technically broken down the fastest in terms of the original material no longer being visually recognizable. But what was left behind wasn't compost in any usable sense. It was wet, slimy, gray-brown, and still carried a faint sour ammonia-like smell even after 6 full weeks. Applying that directly to soil in that state risks actually harming plant roots rather than helping them, the exact opposite of what compost is supposed to do. 3 piles, same total time, same effort in terms of building and watering them, and only one of the 3 produced something I'd actually feel comfortable putting into soil I was trying to bring back to life. Chapter 4. testing what each one actually does to soil. Knowing a compost pile looks and smells right is useful, but I wanted the same kind of direct evidence I've used in every video in this series, so I took each of the 3 finished materials and mixed a portion of it into 3 small, identical samples of the same depleted soil from the earlier videos, then ran the jar test on all 3 exactly the same way as before. The sample amended with Pile 3's balanced compost produced almost exactly the result you'd expect based on everything in this series so far, a clear, thick organic band forming near the top of the water after 24 hours, closely resembling the results from the 30-day soil recovery in the last video. The sample amended with Pile 1's undercooked carbon-heavy compost showed only a thin, faint organic band, barely different from soil that received no compost at all. That result actually makes complete sense once you think it through. That compost wasn't finished. Most of its nutrients were still locked up in material that hadn't fully broken down yet, which means very little of it was actually available to feed soil biology or a plant's roots. It wasn't harmful, it just wasn't doing much of anything yet. The sample amended with Pile 2's slimy, nitrogen-heavy compost was the most concerning result of the entire test. Rather than a healthy organic band, the water turned cloudy and slightly discolored, and the soil itself developed a faint version of that same sour smell from the compost pile. Unfinished, ammonia-heavy compost like this doesn't just fail to help soil, it can actively work against the very biology you're trying to rebuild, since many soil organisms are just as sensitive to that chemical imbalance as plant roots are. That's the part of this experiment I most want gardeners watching this to sit with. Not all compost is a safe, universal fix. The word compost covers a huge range of outcomes, from something that will meaningfully rebuild dead soil to something that can quietly undermine the exact recovery you're trying to create. I'll add one caveat here because I don't want this to come across as more alarming than it should be. Pile 2's compost wasn't permanently ruined. Given another 4 to 6 weeks with regular turning and a handful of shredded cardboard mixed in partway through, it likely would have finished into something perfectly usable, just later than the other 2, and only after correcting the imbalance that caused the problem in the first place. The mistake wasn't fatal, it was just slower and messier than it needed to be. And applying it to soil before it had actually finished is what turned a fixable problem into a genuinely bad idea.
Quick pause before we get into the final piece of this test. If you've been following along with the Soil Intelligence series, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss where this goes next. We're only 4 videos into 10, and the next one builds directly on today's winning compost recipe. All right, back to the bins. Chapter 5. Getting the ratio right without a lab. None of this requires a lab, a kit, or measuring anything down to a precise number, which is honestly the part of this that took me the longest to fully believe back when I started composting years ago. The rough, practical version of the ratio most experienced gardeners actually use is closer to a volume rule than a scientific one, roughly 2 to 3 parts browns for every 1 part greens by bulk, not by weight. Dried leaves, shredded cardboard, and straw count as browns. Fresh grass clippings, vegetable scraps, and coffee grounds count as greens. If you're layering material into a bin and it looks mostly brown and dry with pockets of fresher green material mixed through it, you're generally in a reasonable range. The far more reliable check, and the one I'd actually trust over any ratio on paper, is your own senses, the same tools this entire series keeps coming back to. A pile that's roughly balanced smells earthy, not sour, even while it's actively breaking down. It should feel like a wrung-out sponge, not dripping wet and not bone dry. And within the first week, it should generate noticeable heat at the center, which you can feel with your hand a few inches in without needing a thermometer at all, though a cheap one makes it easier to track over time. If a pile starts smelling sharp or unpleasant, that's not a sign to give up on it. It's a sign it needs more browns mixed in immediately to soak up the excess nitrogen and rebalance the ratio. If a pile isn't heating up or breaking down at all after a couple of weeks, that's usually a sign it needs more greens or simply more moisture, since a pile that's too dry will stall out no matter how well balanced the materials are. This is genuinely correctable at almost any stage. I didn't need to start over on pile 2 once I understood what had gone wrong. I could have folded in a generous amount of shredded cardboard partway through and likely rescued that batch. I chose not to, specifically so this video could show you what an uncorrected mistake actually looks like all the way through to the end.
Here's the actual takeaway from 6 weeks and 3 bins. Compost isn't a single uniform material that's automatically good for soil just because it came from a compost pile. It's a process, and that process can go right or badly wrong depending on a ratio most gardeners have heard of but never actually watched play out with their own eyes. Get that ratio roughly right, mostly browns, some greens, checked by smell and feel rather than a precise measurement, and you get exactly the kind of material that rebuilt dead soil in 30 days in the last video. Get it wrong in either direction, and you either waste months waiting on material that's barely breaking down, or you risk putting something into your soil that actively works against the recovery you're trying to create. In the next investigation, I want to take the winning compost from this test and answer a question a lot of you have already asked in the comments across this series. How does homemade compost made this way actually compare to bagged compost you can buy at any garden center? Same soil, same application, head to head, no guessing. If you want the exact browns to greens ratios, the moisture checks, and the full troubleshooting guide for a pile that's gone wrong, it's all laid out in the Soil Intelligence Handbook, linked in the description below. I'm sure you can't wait for the next video. Stay glued to Evergreen Garden. Until then, keep gardening.